This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the inaugural Hawks Eye View podcast. We're going to call this episode -1 preseason episode. My name is Drew Shipley. Along on the ride with me today, Andrew Barber, my co-host. Andrew, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great and getting better. Excited to be with you on episode -1 or episode 0. Maybe it's like our week 0 here on the Hawks Eye View. Week 0 of college football coming up. Week 0 of Hawks Eye View right now.
Week 0, I've always liked that term. I thought it was kind of silly, but they kind of have a week 0 high school deal too. And Andrew, as a lot of people know, you do a lot of time spending time on the sidelines under the lights Friday nights with KXNO.
Yeah.
How many seasons you been doing that, Andrew?
I believe this is my 7th year. I've kind of lost count, but it's been great, and I'm looking forward to yet another year. And the talent of Iowa high school football has really risen a lot in the past 5 years or so. There's so many Division I, Power 5 level guys, and there's plenty more. So,
It's really awesome, Andrew, to see that a lot of those guys are starting to choose to stay in state. Xavier Wampa at Iowa, Alan Lazard going to Iowa State. This is a Hawkeye podcast, but just off the top of my head, Aaron Graves from Southeast Valley. It's really good to see those top tier talents staying in state now. What we wanted to do today is just have a short little preview of our episodes going forward, introduce ourselves, how the show's going to run in the future in our pregame sets, and then the biggest questions going into the Hawkeye football season. So, Andrew, if you would like to go ahead and just introduce yourself, where you're from, what's your association to Hawkeye sports, and we'll go from there.
well, I'm Andrew Barber, and I'm from the great city of Pella, Iowa, but I now reside in Urbandale, Iowa, and I've lived here for about 7 years or so. And as far as becoming a Hawkeye fan, I did not graduate from the University of Iowa, which is definitely not a prerequisite of becoming a Hawkeye fan. But my earliest memories of Iowa sports and Iowa athletics are guys like Jess Settles, Chris Street. I'm 35 years old, and so those are my guys. Dean Oliver. A lot of Iowa basketball memories in my early childhood, but then also a lot of football memories with guys like Tavian Banks and Tim Dwight and Cedric Shaw and Liddell Betts all over my TV screen when I was a kid growing up. Kevin Casper, that's a huge name. But I think what really solidified it for me was I went to about 4 or 5 home football games during the 2002 Iowa football season, and I'm sure a lot of Iowa fans remember that season with Brad Banks and Dallas Clark and Bob Sanders. I was in the end zone where Dallas Clark caught the game-winning touchdown against Purdue with my family, and that really cemented my Hawkeye fandom. If it wasn't already solidified, it was at that moment as a young 14-year-old man, I believe, at that point in time. So that really solidified my fandom at that moment. So that's my story.
Andrew, we're pretty much the same age. I'm 37 years old, and it's crazy to think that we've seen like a quarter of our life. Jess Settles played basketball for the University of Iowa. Almost.
Yeah. Also, I went to Jess Settles basketball camp growing up. He had camps all over the state of Iowa. I went to the one in New Sharon, Iowa, which is a little bit out of the way for me, not too far from Pella, but I actually, got to meet Jess, got to meet some former Hawkeye players. I mean, Dean Oliver, Ryan Bowen showed up. Kyle Corver was there. He's obviously from my hometown, from Pella. Not a Hawkeye connection. He was with Creighton at the time, but it was very cool. So, yeah, and I actually made like some game-winning free throws at Just Settles basketball camp, and he said he would have no one but me on the free throw line if it was clutch time. And so that's my sports claim to fame right there, is Just Settles' confidence in me.
When we get to basketball season, we're going to have to dig out the Rolodex to see when we get Jess on and see if he remembers that moment. That would be great.
I'm not sure that he will. I'm sure he's seen plenty of youngsters, but he might. You never know.
You remember back in that day, Tom Davis had his University of Iowa basketball camps there on campus. It was like an all-week affair. They housed him up there in the field house and did all that stuff. My brother Trevor, sadly, was an Iowa State graduate, was a Hawkeye first, really, but he was able to go to that camp, and it was nothing but like a legit camp. Like, you stayed the night there all week and learned ball from Dr. Tom, and that was a pretty cool camp, I thought.
Yeah, I was never able to go to anything like that growing up. I know that they continued that tradition post Tom Davis as well for a while, but never able to go to anything like that, unfortunately. But
Sure.
good memories.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on. My name is Drew Shipley. Like I said, I'm 37 years old. Grew up in the city of Newton, Iowa, just north of Andrew there. We're now rivals. We weren't when I was in high school, but Newton and Pella are rivals in pretty much every sport these days. My first Hawkeye moments were going to Kinnick with my dad, 7, 8 years old. Still have, you remember paper tickets, Andrew? Like, I still like things on paper. I don't like this new generation of my tickets on my phone. My menu at the restaurant is a QR code. I want the paper menu. I want a paper ticket, because you never know what you're going to see, that Saturday night. I just like having physical things in my hands. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm much like you. I've saved a lot of my paper tickets from a lot of Iowa football games, a lot of Iowa sporting events, and several other sporting events. But nowadays everything's going digital. But I'm much like you. I really like the paper version. It's kind of a collector's item now.
Sure, absolutely. Moving on. Been a season ticket holder for a couple years as an adult. Lived in West Des Moines about the last decade until I took a military job out here in Arlington, Virginia, working for the National Guard Bureau. So I'm actually living out here in the DMV. It'll be the start of year 3 here in November. Don't plan on coming home anytime soon as far as permanent residence, but definitely be watching on the old YouTube TV. Technology is great these days. You can pretty much watch Hawkeye anything, anywhere, except ESPN this year, which doesn't break my heart, to be honest with you.
Mine either. I really like the deal with Fox. Obviously, Big Ten Network, Fox, and Fox has Gus Johnson, and there's just something about having Gus Johnson on one of your football games that's special. And also, we'll see Iowa football on CBS this year, which is a new venture. So we'll probably get I don't know who it is. I think we'll get
Gary Danielson and that crew.
Yeah, Gary Danielson and that crew. We might get that crew for the Penn State game, for a CBS night game.
It sounds like it. And I believe Peacock and NBC has some television rights as well. I believe the night games, like the primetime night games. I believe I just seen an ad for it earlier today.
Yeah, there will be Iowa football on Peacock and NBC, and I believe even Friday night Big Ten football on Apple TV. So the Big Ten's in a lot of places. We're on Apple, we're on NBC, CBS, Fox, everything but ESPN. But it's working out, especially with $100 million per year in TV revenue alone for every school. I think we're all okay with no ESPN if it's $100 million a year.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Andrew. I was on team cord cutting, but it seems to me that I am losing my leverage on having like 8 subscriptions to all the things that I need to function as a Hawkeye fan. But with that being said, I would rather the money go to companies that I trust than companies that are making record profits and still cutting their talent. I don't get that. You kind of work in the broadcasting world at KXNO. It's not easy, and we don't do this for money, as most of all the radio hosts will tell you right to your face or right through your radio that this is not a money making venture. We do it for love of the game, right?
100%. The other thing, if we just want to touch on streaming for a minute, is there's going to be a lot of women's basketball games in the Big Ten shown on Peacock this year. And I think that is just absolutely great for the game, is that it's a little bit annoying maybe for the casual fan to have it all spread out across streaming services, but it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for other sports to be shown and broadcasted in ways that they weren't before. And I think that's going to be one of the real advantages or positives that come out of this whole new TV deal the Big Ten has.
Absolutely. Hey, want to move on here a little bit. We kind of want to introduce to you guys how our show will be laid out, at least our pregame show, moving forward for the football season. We do have our first question coming in from Jason Price on Facebook. Andrew, do you have a favorite tailgating memory?
One of my favorite tailgating memories is I have a lot of them. I have some family friends that took me a lot in 2002. That's probably where my favorite tailgating memory came from. There was this guy named Chuckles, and he had some beverages, and he came over and was hanging out with us, and he was all excited. And I don't know why they did this, but they decided that it would be great for Cyhawk to be at 7:00 at night that year. So everybody was, more than a few beverages gone by the time the kickoff started. And on our walk to the stadium, we saw Chuckles passed out in a chair on the street corner. He was not making it to the game. I think that was probably one of my most favorite memories. I was 14, obviously, so I wasn't able to partake in anything like that, but that was just my introduction into the world of tailgating and how serious everybody in Iowa took it. And so I think that was one of my favorite tailgating memories.
Well, rest in peace, Chuckles, unless you're still out there. In that case, we hope you're doing well. I think Jason's wanting to allude to a favorite tailgate memory of my own, which actually is infamous. It's not so much a great one. So we went to West Lafayette to tailgate, which, by the way, does not exist in comparison to the University of Iowa. West Lafayette is a very industrial town. At the time, did not support their football team in the least. In fact, our StubHub fees of our tickets cost more than the tickets value themselves. I believe it was 50 cents a ticket, and the StubHub fee was $2.50. So it was something else. But anyway, we had some food and some friendship lined up through some Purdue friends of mine that kind of fell through. And Jason still tells that story to this day. This is about 8 years ago. He just won't let it go, but I'll tell it here anyway. But anyway, we'll move on to how the show's going to lay out here in the future. We're going to open it with what we are calling the opening drive. Things that we're looking at for keys to the game and what to watch for from the opponents and whatnot. I don't know, Andrew, what you think about that opening segment.
Yeah, I love the idea. Opening drive, it applies broadly across the spectrum of multiple sports, mainly football, basketball, when you think about drives. So really, really like your creativity and coming up with all these different segments that we've got that we'll unveil here as we go along.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I would say our next one is probably going to be my most favorite. It's either going to be a guest, a subject matter expert, or what we would like to call behind enemy lines. Our goal is to get somebody from the opposing team on with us, their expert, their broadcast team, student reporter, somebody that knows something about their team other than Andrew and I looking into the box scores and just trying to tell you statistically, where they sit. We want to have true analytical perspective of the opponent. What are they worried about from the Hawks? And what they think the keys to the game are as well. I'm really excited about this one, Andrew.
Me too. looking forward to connecting with a lot of different fan bases and different reporters across all different states with the gamut of all the teams that the Hawks play.
This whole venture is about, to me, is about relationships. So I think, just launching this is episode -1. I think developing relationships is going to be my favorite part of this podcast experience this time around. I've done podcasting before with some of my high school buddies called the Iowa Sports Talk Podcast. We no longer do that, but it was a lot of fun preparing for that. A lot of fun with the interviews, and we'll allude to some of those coming up here at the end of our introduction pod of what we have lined up for you guys. And then we're going to move on to the 2-minute warning is what we're going to call it. We're looking at our predictions for the game and the gambling aspect of things. Gambling is now legal, I believe, in like 34 states. Is more relevant than ever. Can be done from your phone. It just became live here in Maryland, I believe, last July or August. So it's relatively new here in my state. Iowa was kind of right on it from the jump. They were like the 3rd or 4th state, I believe, to go live, and they're showing the fruits of that labor in the great state of Iowa, I think, Andrew.
Yeah, it's been live for a couple of years now here, and yeah, very Iowa on the cutting edge of the sports gambling world.
Do you participate?
I do.
Okay.
I do participate a little bit. I'm not what they would call a degenerate. I don't know. Some might think I'm a degenerate, but I know enough to participate. I will by no means call myself an expert. Hope to have some people on in the future that might be considered more of an expert, but we'll reveal that to you as the weeks go along.
Sure. We'd be remiss if we don't mention our sponsors here at the Hawk's Eye View. We are broadcasting from the Betfred studios, and then with our sponsors, Revelton Distilling and Kyle from Wintrust Mortgage. We couldn't do what we do without those guys, and we're looking forward to those partnerships going into the future.
Absolutely excellent sponsors. So yeah, we're going to, like Drew mentioned, we have all of our segments, our opening drive, our behind enemy lines, and then also our 2-minute warning. But my favorite segment of the show and my pet project, if you will, is the final cut. This is going to be our final thoughts before Drew and I sign off the podcast. It's our parting shot. It's our buzzer beater. It's our last minute field goal kick, whatever you want to call it. Hopefully to win your hearts over at the end of the show, but or maybe make you hate us before we sign off. It doesn't matter. We're still going to give it to you anyways. But the final cut will be brought to you every episode. So looking forward to that.
Can we nickname it the Tate to Holloway, perhaps?
Oh, I like that. Or do we have to call it something else? Do we have to call it the Caitlin Clark? Do we have to call it, her penchant for game-winning shots, especially against Indiana? Or do we have to call it the Fran stare down from the Michigan State game?
FranCon 5.
Yeah, it's our FranCon 5 moment. So we'll have a lot of other good segments for you guys too. And obviously we'll have a lot of good analysis and breakdown in between all of those segments as well. But that is what our show is going to look like. And then I think we're going to, for football season, you're probably going to see us ahead of the game doing our weekly preview shows. And then we are looking to be live right after the game within minutes to be live and give you our instant reaction, our instant thoughts, and maybe take some of your questions at that point in time. And just really looking forward to that, and just maybe the raw aspect of a post-game show on a Saturday after the Hawks have either come up victorious or been on the wrong side of things. But that's what we're looking at.
Absolutely, Andrew. Yeah, I'm really pumped for the post games too, especially when we win, and we should be winning more than we lose this year with the soft schedule that But kind of to wrap up this initial episode -1, the preseason episode, just wanted to ask the biggest question going into the season for the Hawkeye football team. I'm going to lead you, or I'm going to have you lead off, Andrew. What your biggest question mark of the Iowa football team is going in?
Well, I know everybody's biggest question is going to be something offense related. So I'm going to hone in on just one aspect of the offense. Then, and I'll leave some other talking points to you. I'm really curious about the offensive line. And I think that that's probably the biggest question for me. I've heard a lot of smoke about offseason offensive line improvement from a lot of guys who played last year, but maybe were a bit green, meaning they didn't have a lot of experience. Heard about improvements from Connor Colby, from Jennings Dunker, and Nick DeYoung, and a lot of other guys. I really liked the play of Mason Richardman, but overall, the offensive line play last year was just bad. Logan Jones moved over from defensive tackle to center, and then they brought in Rusty Feth and Dejon Parker to kind of bolster that as transfers. So I'm really curious to see who's going to be the right tackle starter, because I think that's a Dejon Parker, Nick DeYoung battle right now, or maybe even a Dunker battle. There's about 3 different guys that I've heard that could start at right tackle this fall for week 1. And I think that's something to monitor. And then just the improvement of the other guys along the offensive line. And that's the critical thing. We used to have one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, and we did not have that last year, or really the year before. We didn't have that. We had Linderbaum, who was a great center, but overall the offensive line, even 2 years ago, was below the Iowa standard. So that is going to be the key, because you can't really run much of a passing game or even a running game if your offensive line play is below average. Iowa needs that to be average or even above average to have the success that they think they're going to have this year on offense.
I couldn't agree more, Andrew. Yeah, the offensive line, which has traditionally in the Kirk Ferentz era, has been the strength of this football team the entire 24 years he's been here. So improvement does need to be shown on the offensive line first and foremost. It doesn't matter who we have back there at quarterback, because we do have a significant upgrade this year with Cade McNamara, which kind of comes to my biggest question mark is the transfer portal pieces that we received in the offseason here. Cade McNamara, number one. How healthy is he? Like, I have no idea how healthy he is. He sat out the entire year last year. I know he was replaced even going into that by J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. But, I mean, this man led him to the Big Ten championship game. So, like, he's capable of winning it too. So between him, Eric All, the tight end, now there's going to be 2 tight ends that we haven't seen since, Noah Fant and George Kittle. No, TJ Hawkinson was the 2 that were there at the same time. The 2 tight end set was very successful in those days. So I'm looking forward to how they're getting the ball to Eric All and Luke Lachey. And then the last thing is how aggressive are we going to be on offense, knowing that stipulation in Brian Ferentz's contract that, it's 25 points a game. And, is the AD going to enforce that? Gary Bart is on the way out. The one that held that contract is out. Is Beth Getz going to hold on to that? Or is there going to be another AD named that permanently that's not her? Because she does just have the interim tag. And then what's that relationship look like between Kirk Ferentz and Beth Getz going forward? I do a lot of math. I'm a good math guy, Andrew. So college football Hall of Fame requires a 60% winning percentage to be eligible to be elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. What that means, Andrew, this season is Kirk Ferentz needs to win 10 football games to exactly hit just above 60%. Anything less is a failure. And in my opinion, if he goes 10 or 2 or better, I think he might hang it up. That's a hot take. But I think if he hits that 10-2 mark, Big Ten championship game appearance, I think he's going to be happy with that at 67 years old.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm on the same page with you with him hanging it up.
That's okay.
I think 2020 when we almost didn't have a season, and David Eichel has said this a lot. If you've heard him on KXNO, but I'm parodying something that Eichel has said really here with my point, and I agree. I'm parodying it because I agree. Kirk got a little bit of a preview of what retired life would look like in 2020, and I'm not sure he liked it because he likes the day-to-day aspect of being a football coach. That's who he is. He's not quite ready to ride off into the sunset. And so I've heard from David Eichel, I've heard from Brad Heinrichs, the leader of the Swarm, that Kirk is invigorated by this transfer portal thing, and he feels like he's good to roll, and he could even go another 4 or 5 years. So I'm of the mindset that this is not Kirk's last year. So maybe I'm setting myself up for major disappointment with that. I could be. I do this because I'm an optimist when it comes to everything Hawkeye sports. I'm always constantly setting myself up for disappointment, but I feel like Kirk is all in on this team and beyond. And I really like this version of Kirk Ferentz, transfer portal Kirk Ferentz, because he's the one who, met with Cade McNamara, Eric All. He didn't leave that to his assistant coaches, from my understanding. He was the one on the phone or making visits to those guys to let them know how important it was that they come to Iowa. And so, yeah, Kirk is all in on Iowa football, and I expect to see him for the next 4 or 5 years.
Andrew, I think we should leave that for our debut episode. I think that's a good debate topic, to be honest with you, of Kirk Ferentz's future, because there's so many question marks out there, that I kind of brought up in my biggest questions piece to that. But we'll leave it at that, guys, and that wraps up our preseason episode of the Hawk's Eye View. From Andrew Barber, my name is Drew Shipley. Have a good evening.